Hello everyone. Imagine becoming a king at just 20 years old. Now, imagine that by the time you're 30, you've conquered almost the entire known world. This isn't a fantasy epic. It's the real story of Alexander the Great, the man who made entire empires tremble with fear. His name has echoed through history for over 2 millennia, a symbol of unmatched ambition and military genius. But who was this young man who dared to challenge the world, and what drove him to achieve the impossible? Today, we unravel the epic saga of Alexander the Great. Born into royalty as the son of King Philip II of Macedon, Alexander was no ordinary prince. His father wasn't just a king. He was a brilliant military strategist who had unified the fractured Greek city-states under Macedonian rule. But Philip had a grander vision: the conquest of the mighty Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world. This dream was passed down to his son, and to prepare him, Philip made a legendary choice for a tutor: the one and only Aristotle. For years, the greatest philosopher of the age trained the future king, not just in warfare and politics, but in philosophy, literature, and science. Alexander devoured Homer's Iliad, dreaming of becoming a new Achilles. He wasn't just being raised to rule, he was being molded to conquer. His childhood was a masterclass in leadership, and his destiny, he believed, was to unite the world under his banner. Then, at just 20 years old, Alexander's world was turned upside down. His father, King Philip II, was assassinated, thrusting the young prince onto a throne that was anything but stable. Seeing a young, inexperienced ruler, the Greek cities Philip had so carefully subdued decided to test their chains. The powerful city of Thebes led a rebellion, thinking they could break free from Macedonian control. They were wrong. Alexander's response was swift and utterly brutal. He marched his army south and, in a shocking display of force, razed Thebes to the ground, sparing only the temples and the house of a revered poet. The message was clear and terrifying. Defiance would not be tolerated. The rest of Greece fell silent, their rebellion crushed before it could even begin. Alexander had secured his kingdom through fear, and now he was free to turn his eyes toward his father's ultimate prize, Persia. With Greece firmly under his heel, Alexander embarked on the campaign that would define his legacy. In 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont narrow strait, separating Europe and Asia, an army of around 48,000 men. He was stepping into the heart of the Persian Empire, a vast domain that stretched from Egypt to India. The Persians, confident in their numbers, met him at the Granicus River. It was a risky battle. The Persians held the high ground on the opposite bank, and many of Alexander's commanders advised waiting. But Alexander wasn't one for waiting. He led the charge himself, plunging his cavalry across the river and straight into the enemy lines. The shock of his attack shattered the Persian formation. It was a decisive victory, the first of many. This single battle opened the floodgates, and the Greek cities of Asia Minor, long under Persian rule, began to fall to him one by one. The world was starting to see that this young king was unlike anyone they had ever faced. Alexander's relentless march brought him face to face with the full might of the Persian Empire at the Battle of Issus. This time, he wasn't just fighting Persian governors, he was facing the King of Kings himself, Darius III, who personally commanded a massive army. The battlefield was a narrow coastal plain, which actually helped Alexander by preventing the Persians from using their superior numbers to surround him. As the battle raged, Alexander spotted Darius in the distance, commanding from his war chariot. In a moment that would become legendary, Alexander gathered his elite companion cavalry and charged directly at the Persian king. It was an audacious, almost suicidal move, but the sheer ferocity of the charge broke the Persian lines around Darius. Panicked, the great king fled the battlefield, leaving his army to collapse in chaos. In his haste, Darius abandoned his own family, his mother, wife, and children, who were then captured by Alexander. By treating them with respect and honor, Alexander wasn't just a conqueror, he was a chivalrous one. The news of the Persian king's flight and the capture of his family spread like wildfire. Alexander was no longer just a Macedonian invader. He was a living legend. After his stunning victory at Issus, Alexander marched south along the Mediterranean coast, heading for Egypt. The Egyptians, who had long resented Persian rule, welcomed him not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. Here, his ambition took on a divine dimension. He founded a new city at the mouth of the Nile, a city that would bear his name for all time. Alexandria, it was destined to become one of the greatest centers of learning and culture in the ancient world. But Alexander had another, more personal journey to make. He traveled deep into the desert to visit the famed oracle of Siwa Oasis, a shrine dedicated to the god Amot, whom the Greeks equated with Zeus. What exactly was said in the inner sanctum remains a mystery, but when Alexander emerged, the high priest greeted him as the son of Amun. He was now officially recognized as a living god, a demigod. This confirmation of his divine status fueled his ambition to an obsessive degree. He was no longer just fulfilling his father's dream, he was chasing his own divine destiny. With Egypt secured and his divine status confirmed, Alexander turned back toward the heart of Persia for the final confrontation. Darius III had gathered another enormous army, scraped together from the furthest corners of his empire, and was waiting for him on the plains of God. This was it, the battle that would decide the fate of the world's greatest empire. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Alexander's tactical brilliance shone brighter than ever. He used a complex strategy of feints and angled advances to create a gap in the Persian line. Once again, he led a cavalry charge straight towards Darius. And once again, Darius fled. The battle turned into a rout, and the Persian Empire effectively died that day. Alexander marched unopposed into the great cities of Babylon and Susa. Finally, he reached Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia. In a controversial act, he allowed his troops to loot the city and then burned the grand palaces to the ground as symbolic revenge for Persia's invasion of Greece over a century earlier. The Achaemenid Empire, the greatest the world had ever known, was no more. But conquering Persia wasn't enough for Alexander. His vision now extended to the very edges of the known world. He pushed his army eastward, chasing a fugitive Darius, until the Persian king was assassinated by one of his own governors. Now undisputed ruler of Asia, Alexander kept going. He led his men through the brutal deserts of modern-day Afghanistan and across the towering Hindu Kush mountains, into a land the Greeks knew only through myths and Dia. Here, they faced challenges unlike any before. The sweltering heat, monsoon rains, and dense jungles were relentless. More terrifyingly, they faced Indian kings who commanded armies of war elephants, massive beasts that could trample infantry and sow terror in the ranks. At the Battle of the Hydaspes, Alexander won a hard-fought victory against King Porus and his elephants. But the cost was high. His men were exhausted, homesick, and terrified of what lay further east. When they heard rumors of even larger armies waiting for them across the Ganges River, they finally put their foot down. The army mutinied. They would go no further. For the first time, Alexander had to relent. He agreed to turn back. The journey home was as brutal as the campaign itself, but Alexander made it back to the heart of his new empire, Babylon. He began making plans for the future to merge Greek and Persian cultures, to explore Arabia, to build a global empire. But those plans would never come to fruition. In 323 BC, after a prolonged bout of feasting and drinking, Alexander fell gravely ill. For days, he was racked with fever until he could no longer speak or move. At the age of just 32, Alexander the Great died. The cause of his death remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Was it malaria, typhoid fever, or was it poison? A treacherous end for the world's most powerful man. We may never know. His generals, known as the Diadochi, immediately began fighting over his vast empire. The unity he had forged through conquest shattered into chaos, leading to decades of war. The man who had conquered the world couldn't even secure his own succession. Alexander's empire may have collapsed, but his legacy was eternal. His conquests shattered the old world order and ushered in a new era, the Hellenistic Age. For the next 300 years, Greek language, culture, art, and philosophy spread from Greece and Egypt all the way to the borders of India. New cities, like Alexandria in Egypt, became vibrant hubs of trade and knowledge, preserving and expanding upon the intellectual achievements of the classical world. The Greek language became the common tongue of scholars and merchants across this vast region, which directly enabled the later spread of ideas and religions across continents. He was a brilliant general, a ruthless conqueror, a visionary, and perhaps a megalomaniac. But one thing is certain. Alexander the Great didn't just conquer the world. He reshaped it forever, and his story continues to inspire and fascinate us to this day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more epic history stories.